Good morning. My name is Cedric Thomas, and I run an open source organization out of Europe, which is called OW2. Thank you for Rios. Thank you, Rios, for inviting me to present the Good Governance Initiative. We're going to go through why we're doing this Good Governance Initiative, then what it is really, how to use it, and then where we go from here. So first of all, the Good Governance Initiative was launched out of the observation that open source is becoming mainstream. Open source is really growing. The slide you see, on this slide, you see results from different surveys. One on the left from Red Hat that identifies that proprietary software will only represent 30% of information systems within the next couple of years. And to the right, you see this result from a famous study by Sonatype that explains that in any new application, 80 to 90% of the code comes from existing components, and many of those are open source. But there is another evolution with open source becoming mainstream that we are realizing, and it is that open source is moving from those that are aware that open source activists that select open source because they believe in it or they know about it, towards a new market of, let's say, open source skeptics. Some people that have been educated with proprietary software and are not familiar with open source. And sometimes they actually feel not that comfortable with open source software because it is a reality that encompasses many different perspectives: technical, legal, commercial, financial, this issue of communities that people are not very comfortable with, and what strategy do we have? How do we actually implement open source, and what do we do with it? Now, what we're trying to do is to address this need by developing an integrated approach that encompasses all these different perspectives into a methodology that can be flexible, that can be adapted to all the specifics of all the organizations, but that can be shared by managers and different organizations as well, that can be verifiable and measurable. So this methodology we are developing is not just a tool to implement open source software, but really a tool to manage, to professionally manage open source. The methodology itself is now fully developed, and that's what it looks like. It's very comprehensive, and it's based on few concepts. First of all, we aim at 5 goals. So the idea is to cover all those perspectives through those 5 goals. The first goal is called usage goal. The second goal is called the trust goal. Third one is the culture goal. The fourth one is the engagement goal. And the fifth one is the strategy goal. Usage, trust, culture, engagement, and strategy. I will get back to these in detail. So we address and we aim at these goals through what we call canonical activities, that are generic activities that have been defined as we were developing the methodology. But to implement them into a specific organization, we need to adapt the methodology to the specifics of each organization, and we do that through customized scorecards. So those concepts, and that's the idea you can have in mind, it's a blueprint based on few concepts, goals that are targeted through activities that are implemented through customized activity scorecards. And that gives you the blueprint for also implementing what is now called open source program offices, if you like. Let's have a look at the first goal. The first goal is the usage goal. It's all about using open source effectively, productively, properly. And it has, we have defined some activities, including managing the open source skills, ensuring that we have the basic skills, identifying what open source software we are using, etc. It's about the inventory of open source used, the inventory of the skills, and developing a basic understanding of the consequences of using software with open source licenses. Each activity is defined through a content, and verification points. So we identify in each goal a number of verification points that help us manage the progress. So that's the usage goal. That's the basic one. Using open source software has to be done in a trustworthy environment. And that's the aim of the second goal, which is to make sure that we use open source software in a way that is legally appropriate, secure, that protected from vulnerabilities, and technically sound, that is with a good management of dependencies. And that's that goal, as it is defined, identifies a number of activities in terms of managing dependencies, licenses, etc. And the verification points include like having a compliance officer, having dependency management processes, or using the appropriate tools. So we have the usage goal and the trust goal, ensuring that we use open source software in a trustworthy environment. Now, the next goal is more about the human dimension of open source software. We call it the culture goal. We know that development teams working with open source software have to get to be acquainted and to become aware of different behavior and to implement some best practices that are expected by the open source community at large. So the culture goal is about making sure that the teams, the individuals, are aware of what's expected in terms of using open source software, and that they have in their mind this open source first attitude. So we have defined a number of activities here, and also some verification points that ensure that the culture goal is on the track. So that's the individual dimension of using open source software. And now we're moving to the corporate dimension with the engagement goal. The engagement goal is about a corporation using open source responsibly and understanding that they have a responsibility with regard to the ecosystem. So in the engagement goal, we have activities that ensure that the organization, the corporation, gives back to the ecosystem, relates to the communities, help them, and some verification points include contracting professional support plans when necessary, participating in open source events, that is being a proud user of open source software. That's the engagement goal, and that's about making sure that the corporation, the organization, is a responsible user of open software, a good open source citizen. And the last goal, the fifth goal, is concerned with making sure that open source software is visible at the highest levels of the hierarchy, but also ensuring that the top management is aware of the possibilities and the benefits of open source software as a vehicle for driving innovation, for supporting the digital transformation, and making sure that and also open source is an element in ensuring some sort of sovereignty by making sure that we control the software. So it's a goal that is not always obvious, but we need to engage internally with the top levels of the hierarchy. So some verification points here include making sure that open source is well established into the corporate IT strategy, or even that open source can be mentioned in the annual report of the company. So with that, we have these 5 goals. So if you look at these 5 goals, and then you think of the activities, and you can have a blueprint for implementing good open source governance. You have the blueprint, the goals, the activities, and their scorecards. And that provides guidance for managing open software. It helps also sharing the experience between organizations, and the way we've implementing it helps monitor the progress and report the progress. So once we have this, we can develop it, implement it, and see that some activities are completed, some are not completed, or we can review the activities or identify the bottlenecks. And that's how we make sure that open source software is not used in a way that is amateurish or clandestine. It's really obvious, and it's part of the management system of the information system. Now, how do we implement this methodology? So I've just described what it is. Now, what we have been doing and how we can actually move from this description into the actual actions. So first of all, we've been developing this methodology from a production system that includes what we call the resource center, which are web pages on the Good Governance Initiative page on the OW2 website with useful links, reading tools, news, presentation, etc. That provides some background, the first stage, the first steps to get into the methodology. Then we have developed on our GitLab, collectively, we have developed what we have called the canonical activities. So it's the place, the GitLab, which is GitLab DGI-Castalia. It's the place where we have been collaboratively identifying and defining these canonical activities. Once from there, you move to the customized activity scorecards, which is a way to actually implement the program defined by a single activity into the different organization, taking into account the culture, the specifics of the hierarchies, who is in charge, and the reality for a different organization. And then there is something that we have not implemented yet, which is called the task tracker. So it's something that should help any managers using the methodology be more productive, in fact, yes. So the customers, the canonical activities are defined through this template with, first of all, you have a general description. Then there is the opportunity assessment. Here we ask to identify why this activity should be endeavors should be started. Then the next section covers the way to identify the progress and what kind of verification points we can implement. It's a suggestion of verification points. Then we identify some of the tools that are available to make to implement the activity or to make it more efficient. And then we have recommendations, which is an area there where we collect feedback from users and guidance, hints, and best practices in managing the activity. So this canonical activity template may evolve or may be refined, and it's something that is collectively developed on this website, where we list all the activities, and they are totally accessible through the link you see at the top of the screen. Now, having the canonical activities is just one thing. It gives you the theory, let's say. It's developed collectively, and now we move to the actual implementation, the real-life implementation to an organization. And we do this through what we call the customized activity scorecard. So this is developed in-house. There are a few authors. It's each manager that takes was suggested by the canonical activities and use the customized activity scorecard to describe precisely, with precise indications, how they're going to implement the activity inside the organization. So it's focused on the organization needs. It's also management tools where you can use this to define how you measure the progress. And once you have the scorecard, you can really manage the progress of the open source program. So using the scorecard, you need to have first of all, discovery. So it's a process. It's an activity. Well, it takes, from the experience, it takes like 1 hour, good hour, to take a canonical activity and to transfer it into a customized activity scorecard. going through discovering exactly what are the concepts and how they apply to the organization, then customizing it by the clear indications that reflect the situation of each organization, then identifying some priorities, because it's out of the question to do everything at once, so you have to prioritize actions, and then activating this by finalizing the scorecard and making sure that we engage some managers and stakeholders. And then there is the idea is to really iterate, as you can see, to go back and to have an ongoing process to help manage open source software. So the activity scorecard is a little bit complex. I'm not going through this, but it has more section than the canonical activity. But these sections are really targeted at making sure that the methodology maps exactly the situation of each organization. So the idea is to start a program. You don't have to complete all the 25, because 5 goals and 5 activities, that's 25 activities in total. You don't need to go through all the activities. You just go through, maybe starting with what we call the low-hanging fruits, identifying the easy activities, then moving on to some that are more difficult. Doing that, it means that there is one manager, an open source manager, that will lead the system, but doing this in relation with the rest of the IT team and with the supervision of the Chief Information Officer. And with that, you can have, you call it the blueprint, the action plan, the roadmap, the game plan, or the program. And this is how gradually you can concretely implement a proper way to manage open source software, or set up what is now called an open source program office. So in action, what do we do really? We know that we have been developing this from our own perception of our environment and from the feedback we got from our members, but we know that we're not the only one on this space. Talking about good governance of open source software, there is the To-Do group from the Linux Foundation, which has produced tons of material, and we have most respect for what they have been doing, but we think the To-Do group is more targeted towards IT and technology companies. There is also the Open Chain, which has also developed a standard in software supply chain where open source is concerned, but that's probably more about the manufacturing companies, or for companies that integrate open source inside products. In France, there is the TOSIT group, which is a group of large French end users who are sharing best practices. So we know there is an environment, and there is a growing concern about how to actually properly manage open source software. We think that with the Good Governance Initiative, we now have a proper value proposition to share a blueprint to implement corporate-wide open source policies. And really what we're trying to do is to make sure that organizations now use open source software professionally and use it in a way that is appropriate, and also contribute back to the ecosystem, and with a view for the European open source ecosystem. Because of course, as I said, we're targeting to the needs on essentially non-IT tech companies, and it's not a top-down approach but more a bottom-up approach that starts from the diversities of all the verticals and the companies. So with in pushing this developing and pushing this methodology, we have this 3 strategic objectives. One being to contribute to defining what's the state of the art in terms of using and managing open source software. People are not comfortable about managing open source software, or implementing or using it, and they don't know whether they're doing it right or not, or what they're missing. So with this comprehensive framework, we give them exactly what we hope we are approaching to sharing with users or potential users what is the state of the art in this area. The second objective is really, as I said, to foster a pan-European approach, addressing the needs of non-IT companies, transportation companies, manufacturing, utilities, healthcare, education, all these different sectors that are not IT companies or technology companies. And we are looking at this, and we think that there may be some specifics, some diversity. It could be cultural diversities, especially when looking at the different European countries. And then the third objective is really to develop something that we can share. So there is no barriers. It's totally accessible. You don't have to become a member of anything. You don't have to pay anything to access this methodology. It's all there, available for download. So really the idea is to make it as accessible as possible. So to make it really accessible, we've engaged with non-profit European European non-profit organizations, including the Eclipse Foundation, the Foundation for Public Code, Open Forum Europe, and the Free Software Foundation Europe, and we created the OSPO Alliance. So this OSPO Alliance was launched in June 2021. And it has developed a website. It's supported by this website called OSPO.zone, and where we have attracted the interest and testimonials from a number of users and European and even non-European stakeholders. So this is where we are going to develop or disseminate this methodology. So we have published the handbook. So the methodology now is available. It's been published and announced at the Paris Open Source Experience event. It's a good 50-page document where you have all the descriptions in detail of the methodology, what we want to achieve, and all the activities. So the activities are detailed there, and then there is also the template for the customized application scorecard. So how you can get in on it? Well, not too difficult. We have actually two areas. Developing the methodology, contributing to the methodology is done on the from the OW2 website, from the web pages of the Good Governance Initiative. You see the URL here on the left of your screen. And if you want to contribute to the dissemination or share experience and have other more far-reaching discussions, it's done on the OSPO.zone website. So these are the two aspects. The methodology has been developed as a joint effort within an OW2 initiative. It powers, in fact, the OSPO.zone, which really is the community that is being built around this methodology. And that's it for me. So I hope to see you on one of these websites, and you're all welcome to contribute. And now it's time for questions and answers. Please go ahead.